Hello, hello, good evening, everyone. Hi, how are you on today? Man, there are some text messages, and I'm going to talk about this because I think it's something that we need to all talk about and to really be cognizant and conscious of what is going on here with Ginni Thomas. Virginia Thomas, you know that she is the wife of Clarence Thomas, who sits on the Supreme Court. Now, there are some text messages between Ginni Thomas and Mark Meadows. Now, before I get started on the text messages, you know, Clarence Thomas is in the hospital, unless he's gotten out, but he's in the hospital. And I want you to know there's a story out here about Clarence Thomas where an inmate who had been placed on death row, and so they were going to give him the lethal injection, and he requested prayer. And Terrence, Clarence Thomas, Clarence Thomas was the only one that said no. He was the only one that did not want to allow this inmate who is going to die by lethal injection to have prayer with a minister come in and pray for him before he passed away, before, they did the injection. And I wonder, I have a question. I wonder if Clarence Thomas needs prayer now that he is not doing well. And this is not to mock him, but we have to be very careful about saying people don't need prayer and trying to stop and interfere in the work of the Lord. When God has called ministers, pastors, bishops, preachers, apostles, evangelists, you know, and so forth and so on to pray for people. That is the calling of that person that God has called. And for Mr. Clarence Thomas to intervene in that and to say, no, there's something wrong with that. And so I don't know what Clarence Thomas or Ginni Thomas' religious beliefs are, but I do believe that if a person asks for prayer, we ought to oblige them. We ought to pray for them. The word of God tells us to pray for folks, to pray for people, and to pray without ceasing. So I have kind of a problem with Mr. Thomas saying that this man could not have prayer. He admits what he's done. He admitted his guilt, this inmate that, that's on death row. He admitted it. He doesn't object to what he's done. He doesn't uh argue with it, but he asked for prayer. And I think that we ought to pray for one another. And when someone is asking for prayer, we ought to pray for them. And I don't think anyone should be standing in the way of somebody asking for prayer. So I thought I'd get that out of the way. But I still, one question is, and what do you think about that question? Do you think Clarence Thomas is in need of prayer? And do you think that they stopped by at the hospital, the clergy, to give Clarence Thomas prayer? Now let's get into this video. Excuse me, yeah, into this video on this article. Let's get on into this. Now it says that the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th riot has in its possession more than 24 text messages, 29 in total, between former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and Virginia Ginni Thomas, a conservative activist and the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, according to multiple sources familiar with the messages. These text messages, according to sources, took place between early November 2020 and mid January 2021. Thomas recently revealed that she attended the pro Trump rally that preceded the U.S. Capitol attack on January 6, 2021, but says she played no role in planning the events of that day. Now, if you saw my video that I did about her saying that she went before the attack happened, but she was also had posted Facebook posts of encouraging and putting, I would say, batteries in their back. So if you haven't seen that video on my channel, you can take time, when you get out of your busy schedule, to go and look at that video, and then you can come back and look at this one or go back to that one, however you want to do it. But that video is out there that I did on my channel. Now, the text messages reviewed by CNN show Thomas pleading with Meadows to continue the fight to overturn the election results. She played the part. She instigated. She put batteries in people's back. She promoted this. She promoted this. She really did. And the truth will always come out, and the truth will set you free. And if we just sit back, and read and research and pay attention, the truth is going to come out. See, God always reveals the truth, not in our time, but he reveals it in his time. And so she has played a part in it. She can say she didn't. She can downplay it all she wants to. But Ginni Thomas, Virginia Ginni Thomas, the wife of Clarence Thomas that sits on the Supreme Court, played a role, you people. Yes, she did. And it says, help this great president stand firm. Mark. And she has exclamation marks behind Mark's name. Three of them. Dot, dot, dot. You are the leader with him who is standing for America's constitutional governance at the precipice. The majority knows Biden and the left is attempting the greatest and heist of our history. Thomas wrote on November 10th, 2020, and heist is with a capital H, and she put a capital H of history. So she wanted those words, heist in history, to stand out. Now, Thomas regularly checked in with Meadows to encourage him to push claims. Look, she's encouraging Meadows, Mark Meadows, to push claims of voter fraud and work to prevent the election from being certified. Isn't that something? Meadows often responded on that same day as the previous text he wrote, I will stand firm. We will fight until there is no fight left. Our country is too precious to give up on. Thanks for all you do. This is what Mark responded to her. Now, on November 24th, 2020, Meadows promised he wasn't done battling on Trump's behalf and evoked his faith as a source of strength. He goes on to say, this is what Mark Meadows says. This is a fight of good versus evil. Evil always looks like the victor until the King of Kings triumphs. Do not grow weary in well-doing. The fight continues. I have staked my career on it. Well, at least my time in D.C. on it. Now, let me tell you this. He's trying to use some words from the Bible, King of Kings, and don't grow weary in well-doing. People try to use an evil versus good. They try to use words, to incite, to invoke, to trigger people into feeling a certain kind of emotional way. But what he's doing is not right. So let's keep it real. This is not biblical. What he's doing is not biblical. Him or Ginni Thomas. And I'm gonna get to that when she did the thing about telling that Anita Hill needs to apologize to her husband, Clarence Thomas. No, Sister Ginni, white Sister Ginni. What you need to do is you need to apologize to the American public for your role that you played as a right wing in inciting and invoking and encouraging and instigating this assault attack on the American, Capitol. This is what needs to happen. She needs to be thoroughly investigated. And if charges need to be brought up, that needs to happen for her too. So Thomas wrote to Meadows on November 19th, 2020. Sounds like Sydney and her team are getting inundated with the evidence of fraud. Make a plan, release the Kraken, and save us from the left taking America down. Attorney Sidney Powell, who worked on Trump-aligned lawsuits seeking to challenge the results of the 2020 election, was also referred to by herself as the Kraken in reference to the ancient mythological sea creature. By the end of November, Thomas was getting increasingly frustrated. Now listen, she was getting frustrated with the lack of progress of the attempt to find a path to overturn the results. On November 24th, 2020, she wrote, I can't see Americans swallowing the obvious fraud. Just going with one more thing with no freaking consequences. The whole coup and now this, we just caved to people wanting Biden to be anointed. Many of us can't continue the GOP charade. A good old party. Charade. Ginni Thomas, you guys. See, peep game. Ginni Thomas, the one that wanted Anita to apologize to Clarence. No, Ginni, you need to apologize. You do need to apologize, Ginni. And I'm saying you need to apologize. So the committee is in possession of only one text from the month of January 2021, 4 days after the riot on Capitol Hill. Thomas wrote to Meadows that she was angry with Vice President Mike Pence for not taking the steps necessary to block the certification of the election results. Wow, while your husband sits on the Supreme Court. So it all comes out, Ginni, that you are a dishonest woman. You are so dishonest, Ginni, and you have married a man that sits on the Supreme Court that took an oath, man, to do the right thing. I can't quote the whole oath. I will not do it. But you know what? You are married to a man that's supposed to do right by the people, for the people, Ginni. And look at what you're doing, Ginni. You don't lead by example, Ginni. And here she goes. We are living through what feels like the end of America. But you don't get to make that call. Only God gets to make that call, Ginni. So most of us are disgusted with the VP and are in a listening mode to see where to fight with our teams. Those who attack the Capitol are not representative of our great teams of patriots with DJT. Amazing times, the end of liberty, Thomas wrote. You know what? What liberty and freedom have we really had as Black people? So at the end of the, excuse me, at the end of the day, Ginni, what liberty are you talking about? Are you talking about your liberty as a privileged white woman, Ginni? That's what it sounds like, Ginni. But see, Thomas' messages reflected a belief that the legal challenges presented by a group of conservative lawyers helping the campaign were valid. He attempted to convince Meadows to put his faith in the hands of Powell, who had spent the weeks following the election claiming to have mountains of evidence of fraud that never martialized. Now they say martialized, I would say materialized, but martialized, okay? However, we shouldn't be putting our trust and our faith in no person. Our trust and faith should be in God. And we should be praying for people that are in office, these leaders and politicians. We always should pray for them. And the Bible calls us to pray for them. But for you to tell him to put his faith in the hands of Powell, I would not. Mark, don't do it. And I'm just saying, you headed for perdition. You already headed for destruction because see now, the text message is out and there could be even more text messages. And it goes on, the content of the text messages may be of interest to the committee's investigation because it asks Meadows in a subpoena to turn over both documents and your deposition testimony regarding these and other matters that are within the scope of the committee's activity. The revelation of text messages between Thomas and Meadows, both key allies of former President Donald Trump, comes as progressives, and some legal ethics experts see her activism as a potential conflict of interest for Justice Thomas' work on some Supreme Court cases. And I agree. Exactly. And Meadows turned over thousands of text messages before he stopped cooperating with the committee. The texts are proven to hold a treasure trove of information about what was going on in the White House in the days leading up to the insurrection and what people in Trump's orbit were thinking. The text messages in the committee's possession are only part of the tranche of documents that Meadows provided to the committee during the short period of time he was cooperating with their investigation. They do not necessarily represent the sum total of communication between Thomas and Meadows during that period of time. There is also the possibility some messages were not turned over due to privilege claims. Meadows and Thomas are longtime friends, both of whom have been active in conservative causes for decades. While Thomas has been actively involved in politics, and I'm going to repeat what I said in the first video I did, is that she says she has been careful to distance her activity from her husband, and that's what they're saying. And that is what she said before. So see, she is saying what she said before. But we have our own separate careers. Here she goes, and our own ideas and opinions too. Yep, we should have our own ideas and opinions, but you also should be in a line with, your husband because of where he's at, his position, and you also should not be unequally yoked. So here you are as a white woman married to a Black man, and you are sitting up here doing these things. Wow, Ginni. But see, the truth always shall come out and it will set you free, honey. Clarence doesn't discuss his work with me, and I don't involve him in my work, she recently told the Free Beacon. The work of the January 6th Select Committee has already come before the Supreme Court. In early January, the court did not stand in the way of the release of thousands of documents from Trump White House, despite the former president suing to keep them secret under executive privilege. The vote on the matter was 8-1, with only Justice Thomas dissenting. And he keeps on dissenting. He's dissenting with that inmate that wanted prayer. He dissented then, and he's dissenting now. He gained people 8-1. Everybody else voted that it should be released, but he said no. And see, his wife has he already knows. See, let me tell you something. She might be keeping stuff a secret and don't discuss this and don't discuss that, but he knows. He knows because he's married to her. They live in the same household that I probably believe they do. They more than likely are in the same household, because she said when she comes home, she doesn't discuss her work, he doesn't discuss his, what she do and what he does. But at the end of the day, Ginni, you ought to continue to be investigated and maybe even charged with criminal activity when they get done. And we want this to be pursued. Yes, we do, Virginia Ginni Thomas. And for Clarence Thomas, maybe he ought to be set down. Maybe we need to get somebody else in his seat, because we cannot continue to let this go on. We're calling on Biden to do the right thing, Biden, Kamala Harris, whoever you are, and the senators. We are calling on you to do the right thing when it comes down to this, because you put a lot of people's lives at risk when you did this and allowed the assault on the American Capitol. Not only that, but when you have someone that's married to someone that sits on the Supreme Court, and they're out here putting batteries in people back, they're aggravating, instigating, they're doing all these things, promoting, and she did it, is right here. And I'm gonna say allegedly, just to be clear, be protecting myself, allegedly, but it's right here. This is what CNN is saying, y'all. And it's right here, CNN.com. This is what CNN is saying. And CNN reached out to both Meadows' attorney and Thomas directly for comment, and yet have yet to hear back. And a spokesperson for the committee declined to comment. Okay, people, so guess what? We need to stand firm. Do you think that Clarence Thomas should be set down, should be removed from should be removed, impeached, however they need to do it? Do you think he should be removed from his seat? Number one. Do you think they should continue the investigation of Virginia Ginni Thomas? Number two. And do you think that if they continue the investigation and they find out that there need to be charges, do you think they should go full-fledged on charging her? Please leave your respectful comments in the comment box on this video, and I will keep you informed on what's going on with the updates that I get from this. And also, but the thing is, I want to tell you something about this so that you will know, and I will add this in here as well. This is a young man that I was talking about earlier when I started this video, and I do want you to know that I'm going to put this in the description so you can actually take a look for yourself. It says Supreme Court backs pastor prayer, touch in death chamber. And it says a near unanimous Supreme Court on Thursday said a death row inmate spiritual advisor should be able to pray aloud and lay hands on an inmate at the moment of his execution, siding with a Texas man who had challenged a state ban on the practice. Chief Justice John Roberts, in an opinion joined by 7 other justices, wrote that there was not a compelling government interest in denying the religious exercises, noting their extensive history in America death chambers and the availability of less restrictive steps to ensure security and decorum in that space. The decision was a victory for John Henry Ramirez, a 37-year-old sentenced to death by lethal injection for the 2004 murder of a convenience store clerk and father of 9, Pablo Castro. Now, Ramirez, who does not contest his guilt or the sentence, as I summarized it for you in the beginning of this video, wants his Baptist minister to be present inside the death chamber to pray out loud and lay a hand on his body at the moment he receives a lethal injection of phenobarbital. Ramirez is likely to suffer irreparable harm in the absence of injunctive release because he will be unable to engage in protective religious exercise in the final moments of his life, Rogers wrote. Congress determined that prisoners like Ramirez have a strong interest in avoiding substantial burdens on their religious exercise, even while confined. It's a mixed blessing, the minister, Pastor Dana Moore, told ABC News of the court's ruling, because he, Ramirez, can receive a date of execution. The blessing part is the precedent it sets, saying religion still matters in this country, Moore said. I will be there to pray with John at his moment of execution and hold onto his hand or foot, provided that's still what he wants. Justice Clarence Thomas, who remains hospitalized for a 6 day, so he's still in there, you all, while being treated for an infection, was the long dissent. He accused Ramirez of manufacturing a delay of his punishment. Congress created a potent tool with which prisoners can protect their sincerely held religious beliefs, but like any tool, it can be wielded abusively, he wrote. Audible prayer and touching by a Texas corrections chaplain had been commonplace for more than 30 years of executions, but the state banned the practice in 2019, citing security citing security concerns. Now, look, this is an inmate that is in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. This is where he's at, and okay, so I'm not going to ever deny anyone prayer, regardless. You know, we can't say if God has forgiven this man for what he has done, and I'm not condoning what the man has done. But this man says that he's not arguing about this. He knows where he's at, okay, but he wants prayer. So during oral arguments in November, Texas Solicitor General Judge Stone argued that a botched execution would be catastrophic and that the presence of a private chaplain within the tight confines of the execution chamber heightens the risk that something could go wrong. We're attempting to minimize risk almost all the way to zero as much as we reasonably can, Stone said. Ramirez's legal team invoked a federal law meant to protect the free exercise of religion, challenging the state's claim that there is no less restrictive alternative. If the real concern is the compelling interest of the safety of the security protocols of the execution, said Ramirez's attorney Seth Kretzer, there simply exists, as far as everyone has looked for 100 years, not a single instance of any chaplain ever causing any disturbance. Okay? Now, Pastor Dana Moore of Corpus Christi, Texas, has ministered to death row inmate John Ramirez since 2017 and wants the Supreme Court to allow him to pray with Ramirez at the moment of execution. Now, nearly a dozen faith groups and religious liberty advocacy organizations, including the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and Christian Legal Society, they filed briefs supporting Ramirez. Moore told ABC News last year that he in no way condones Ramirez's brutal and tragic act of murder, but said in John, I saw the face of Jesus. We'll be less than 2 arms lengths away from the viewing gallery and the victim's family, Moore said at the time. The walls are paper thin. I am cognizant of that and the grief they are still going through, but I will pray for John and for his victim and family. That's my calling. That's why I do what I do. And I have to stand with the ministers. I have to stand with the bishops. We have to stand and pray when people ask for prayer. It doesn't matter what they have done. Not saying we condone it, not saying that, that he's getting away with something and making excuses, but people that ask for prayer, they deserve to have prayer. And that is simple as that. And we should never sit up here and say that people do not deserve prayer, because he definitely deserves prayer. Now let's get into the description and the disclaimer. Into this disclaimer here. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. In my opinion, it's not necessarily someone else's opinion, but however, this is my opinion of this. I gave you the information. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you're not a subscriber. And please leave your respectful comments below. And if you want to donate to the channel, you're more than welcome to do so. And don't forget to head over to my Instagram channel, StandupBcounted, because I am a jewelry artist and I love to make beautiful things for beautiful people. So God bless you all on today. Peace out in this storm of dread. But we have Christ to thank for keeping us and being there for us in this time of dread and the dangers that lurk around in our society on today. God bless you all.